Hey y'all, welcome back to Private Thoughts. Thanks for joining me again in my quiet space out in the backyard, getting in touch with nature. Something's been on my mind lately, and I wanted to share and talk with you about it. Dealing with a loss and grieving a loss of a loved one, or whatever it is that you may have lost. Amy and I, and the kids, we've dealt with our share of loss, our death in the families. We not a lot of you know, but we lost a daughter back in 2006. We lost her shortly after birth, and that was a hard blow to our family. We were all excited to have another child. Abby was about a year and a half old, and so Emily is the daughter's name, our daughter's name. And she would have been, at the time of this recording, she would have been 13 and a half. And sometimes I wonder what she would be like. Anyway, she would have been our youngest daughter, about a year and a half younger than Abby. About 7 or so years younger than Cheyenne. I'm trying to think of how old the other kids were when this all happened. I know Abby was too young to remember. Katie was probably borderline. I think Katie was about 4. And then Cheyenne was about 7 and a half. No. Cheyenne had just turned 7. It was Memorial Day of 2006, May 29th. I'll never forget it. Abby, at a year and a half, we were in a rent house, and the screen door on the rent house, the little pin on the plunger was loose, and I wasn't as responsible as I am today. And Abby would play with that little pin. She would take it out, and occasionally she would put it in her mouth. And I'm not proud that I allowed that to happen. Don't get me wrong. I've learned since then, but on this particular day, I'm glad it happened. And I'm about to tell you why. Amy was washing dishes. I don't know where I was, but I was home. I was in the house. That was before I became a fireman. And Abby was playing at the screen door. She liked to look outside. And Amy said that she heard the clink of the pin on Abby's teeth. And when she wrung out her hands like that to go and sweep Abby's mouth, there was no pin. She didn't choke. Apparently she swallowed it. We didn't know that at the time. We weren't sure. We assumed. We figured that she swallowed it. So I had the bright idea that I was going to come and borrow a metal detector to try to see if that's where it was. Well, the relatives that had the metal detector didn't have batteries for it, so we went on to Lake Charles, to the hospital, to get Abby checked out, just to be sure everything was okay. And when we got to the hospital, it was probably 45 minute drive. Amy was about 7.5 months pregnant. It was early to be giving birth. And we got out of Katie was at her dad's that day. She wasn't with us. So we get out of the car, and almost immediately, Amy felt lightheaded. Something was wrong. So Amy says that she lost her vision. She couldn't see anything. She could hear, but she was losing consciousness. And that scared us all. And so we were in the right place at the right time. We were at the hospital. So I quickly get Amy over to the emergency room and get her seen about instead of Abby. Abby turned out fine, by the way. So that's nothing to worry about. So we get Amy seen about. By the time we get to the emergency room, we had to quickly sit Amy in a wheelchair because she was passing out. So we get her quickly triaged in the emergency room, and this turned out to be a true emergency, y'all. It was so scary. Within an hour, less than an hour from when we pulled up at the hospital, Amy was on a table and in emergency C-section. It turns out she had a full placental abruption. And what that means is, if you're not familiar, the placenta disconnected from the uterus, which means the baby was on her own inside mom's tummy. No longer, her lifeline was no longer connected to her mom. And when Amy was laid on the table, we didn't know all this then. We just knew something was very wrong. I think I was 30. Yeah, I was 30 years old. Still really a young man to be dealing with something like that, inexperienced. I was scared to death. I didn't know how to dial my phone to call family to come and help because we had Abby and Cheyenne with us, and I was in no condition to take care of them. The nurses there at the hospital were very, very kind. They put Abby and Cheyenne together in a room where they could color and they were safe. I finally figured out how to dial my phone. I called my mom. I called Amy's parents. People started showing up at the hospital. And, but of course, you know, it was a little bit of a trip, so they didn't show up till a few minutes later after the C-section was already complete. And I'm kind of jumping back and forth, and I apologize for that. Amy's laying on the table, face up, and her stomach is pointed, very pointed, pyramid shaped. And that image is burned in my mind, and hearing Amy say, no, 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 it's too early, you can't take her. And me feeling like just so helpless. Trying to talk to Amy and let her know, you know, it's going to be okay, which I had no idea. I didn't know it was going to be okay. And just convincing her that the doctors knew better. They know what they're doing. And when they delivered Emily, she didn't cry. And I had been in the delivery room three times before that. Even though I'm not Katie's father, I did make it into the delivery room because her dad her dad was out of town and he was trying to come in. He made it. But anyway, that's besides the point. So Emily wasn't crying. And it scared me even more. And then they whisked her away to the other side of the room. And I could tell, with my emergency responder background, because even before I was a career fireman, we had done some volunteering and stuff. So we had medical training. So I could tell, even with the doctors facing away from me and me not seeing what was happening, I knew they were giving CPR. And they got her heartbeat back. She had a heartbeat. But because of the length of time that her brain was without oxygen, she was in a constant state of seizure. And I was the only family member who saw that. By the time Amy was ready to come out, they had already medicated Emily enough that the seizure had stopped. Well, because of the medication, the heavy dose of medication that they had to give for the seizure, they couldn't get an accurate EEG, which is a brain scan, to see what the brain activity looks like. So for the next 11 days, we were back and forth to the hospital every day, which was about 45 minutes away. We would go and visit Emily daily because she stayed in the NICU, the NICU. And for that 11 days, the family grew closer. And the reason, I don't know if I said this already, but the reason why it took 11 days, that's how long it took for the medicine to wear off to get an accurate EEG, brain scan. And in that time, I was angry with God. I didn't understand why he could let this happen. I've since made amends with God, but I prayed along the way, and the night before the 11th day, by that time we knew that we had a decision to make. Because on the 10th day they got the accurate EEG and there was no activity. And we had a decision to make the next day. To take her off of the machines. And I prayed, God, don't make me make that decision. We got to the hospital the next morning on the 11th day, and we knew the inevitable was happening. So we were prepared to take turns holding Emily one last time. And that's when God answered my prayer. Because when the nurses lifted Emily to put her in Amy's sister's arms, her vitals started to crash. And we didn't need to make a decision. Because she was going home. We still took turns holding her one last time. But it wasn't quite what we expected. And over the next few hours, we had the opportunity to meet with a social worker and get the help that we needed emotionally and with the process of what needed to happen then. On that note, don't ever let somebody make fun of you or treat you badly because you get emotional help or mental help. We'll get to that on another private thoughts segment, but we bathed Emily after she had passed, and we opted for an actual funeral. And I think the funeral was a good decision because it helped us quite a bit to heal from that loss. And in retrospect, I often say that in 11 days, this child, without saying a word, changed a family. And it made us all very much closer. We still consider, for those who know, that we have 4 daughters. And just one never came home with us. She went home with God. And in looking back and asking, in the moment I asked God, how could you do this? And looking back, I realized that there's so much that she never had to deal with. Her body didn't survive, but she is perfect now. And that's a thing that I've been wanting to share with y'all for quite some time now. This is by no means a pity party. This is hopefully, if somebody's dealing with something like this, I want you to know that you can come out the other side stronger. You can grieve for as long as you need. I know people personally who have lost children that had the time to get to know them. We didn't. We didn't have that emotional connection with our child. I'm not here to say whether it's easier or more difficult, because I don't know. I can't compare. I think each loss is difficult in some way, and it takes time to grieve. The Bible says that everything has a season, and that includes grief. Don't let anybody ever tell you it's been this long, you need to just get over it, because that is so unfair. So unfair. I hope that this segment of Private Thoughts can be inspirational to you, and that we can bond a little better over it. I'm going to go ahead and end it here, but I want to keep this up. I'm really enjoying sharing with you, and I really enjoy the comments that you guys leave on. I've only done one before, but I've enjoyed the comments that you left on it, and I hope to see lots of comments down below. If you can relate, please share your story. We like to get to know you as well as you like to get to know us. Be blessed and have a wonderful day. We love you, and until next time.